The transport shuttle broke through the crimson atmosphere of Drakenheim, and Katie Reed pressed her face against the window like a kid on her first airplane ride. Below her, the draconic Imperial War Academy stretched across the volcanic landscape like something out of a fantasy novel. Obsidian towers, flowing lava moats, and training grounds that glowed with residual heat from dragon fire. "This is insane," she whispered to herself. Completely insane. 3 months ago, Katie had been teaching second graders in Portland. Her biggest worry was getting Billy Thompson to stop eating glue. Now she was about to become the first human ever accepted into the most elite military academy in the known galaxy. Not because she was strong or fast or particularly brave, but because some bureaucrat at the Galactic Coalition thought humans had unique interpersonal capabilities that could benefit interstellar relations. In other words, they picked her because she was good with kids. Dragon kids. Who breathed fire. And stood 12 feet tall. And came from a warrior culture that valued individual strength above everything else. The shuttle landed with a hiss. Katie grabbed her backpack, the same one she'd used for camping trips, now stuffed with everything she owned that seemed remotely appropriate for Dragon Military School. Which wasn't much. The ramp lowered, and heat hit her like opening an oven door. She stepped out onto black stone that was actually warm under her sneakers. Across the landing pad, a massive dragon waited. His scales were deep red, almost brown, and his eyes were the color of molten gold. He looked at Katie the way someone might look at a bug that had accidentally wandered into their house. "Commander Varketh," Katie said, trying to keep her voice steady. She'd practiced the formal dragon greeting. "I'm honored too." "You are late," Varketh rumbled. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "The orientation began 10 minutes ago. The shuttle got delayed at the—" "I did not ask for excuses." Varketh turned and began walking, his tail leaving a trail in the ash behind him. "Follow. Try not to embarrass your species further." Katie jogged to keep up with his enormous strides. They passed through corridors carved from volcanic rock, walls decorated with banners showing dragons in battle. Every dragon they passed stopped to stare at her. Some looked curious. Most looked offended. They entered a massive hall where hundreds of young dragons sat in perfect formation. At the front, an ancient dragon with silver scales was mid-speech, his voice echoing off the stone walls. This was clearly a big deal, the kind of ceremony where you absolutely did not interrupt. Varketh pointed to a spot at the back. "Stand there. Do not move. Do not speak. The address of fire has 2 hours remaining." 2 hours? Katie glanced around. Every dragon sat perfectly still, barely blinking. Their culture valued discipline and endurance. Standing still for hours was probably nothing to them. For Katie, it was going to be torture. She made it 40 minutes. Her feet ached. Her back screamed. The heat was making her dizzy, and she'd already drunk all her water. The ancient dragon's speech had become a droning background noise. Something about honor and flame and the warrior's path. Katie looked around. Nobody was watching her. They were all focused on the speaker with religious intensity. She quietly sat down cross-legged on the stone floor. Instant relief. The effect was immediate. The dragon next to her noticed. Then the one next to him. Like dominoes, awareness spread through the room. The ancient dragon's speech faltered. Hundreds of reptilian heads turned to stare at the tiny human sitting casually on the floor, now pulling a granola bar from her backpack. The silence was deafening. Katie realized her mistake too late. She looked up to find every eye in the room locked on her. Including Commander Varketh's. His expression suggested he was seriously reconsidering humanity's place in the galaxy. The ancient dragon at the front spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. "The human shows disrespect." Katie stood quickly, granola bar still in hand. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Humans aren't really built for standing that long. Our spines are different. And I was getting dizzy from the heat. I thought sitting quietly would be better than passing out." This explanation did not help. "Remove her," the ancient dragon commanded. But Varketh raised a claw. "The human is protected by coalition law. She cannot be expelled without cause. Sitting is not cause." The ancient dragon's eyes glowed brighter. For a moment, Katie thought she might actually see dragon fire up close. But finally, he nodded curtly. "She may stay. Standing or sitting. It matters not. Weakness reveals itself." The speech continued. Katie sat on the floor for the remaining hour and 20 minutes, feeling the weight of hundreds of hostile stares. She'd been at the academy for less than 2 hours and had already become the most hated person on campus. That night, they showed her to the barracks. Talon Wing was carved above the entrance. Inside, 30 young dragons occupied heated alcoves carved into the walls, each space perfectly sized for a dragon's body. At the far end, in the coldest corner farthest from the heat vents, was a human-sized platform. Katie climbed up and looked around. The dragons were settling in, some already asleep, others maintaining their weapons or studying. None acknowledged her existence. She unpacked slowly. Photos of her nephews went on a small shelf. Her camping lantern provided a soft glow. And from the bottom of her pack, she pulled out her grandfather's harmonica, the one thing she'd brought that had nothing to do with practicality. Katie didn't even think about it. She just started playing. An old folk song her grandfather had taught her. Something about rivers and home. The melody drifted through the stone chamber, soft and melancholic. One by one, the dragons stopped what they were doing. In the darkness, 30 pairs of eyes gleamed, all focused on the strange little creature making impossible sounds from a tiny metal instrument. In the alcove nearest the cold corner, a dragon smaller than the others, a runt by dragon standards, though still 3 times Katie's size, shifted closer to listen. His name was Pyrith, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, he didn't feel completely alone. Katie woke up shivering. The stone platform was cold, and even with her sleeping bag, the temperature in her corner of the barracks felt like a walk-in freezer. Meanwhile, 30 dragons slept peacefully in their heated alcoves, radiating warmth like living furnaces. She checked her watch. 4:30 in the morning. In 30 minutes, training would begin. The first week at the academy was an exercise in humiliation. Dragon training was designed for dragons, and the instructors made zero accommodations for the single human in their ranks. When Talon Wing assembled for morning exercises, Katie watched in awe as her classmates hoisted massive boulders onto their backs and carried them up the side of a volcano. Each boulder weighed several tons, roughly what a dragon weighed. Brooks, Instructor Kravik growled, his green scales gleaming in the morning light. You will complete the exercise. Katie looked at the boulder. Then at Kravik. Then back at the boulder. That thing weighs more than a car. I did not ask for commentary. Complete the exercise or be marked as failed. The other dragons watched with barely concealed amusement. A few smirked, which looked terrifying on reptilian faces. This was exactly what they expected. The weak human couldn't even complete basic training. Katie walked around the boulder, examining it. She couldn't lift it. That was obvious. But maybe she didn't have to. She noticed how the dragons were struggling, their massive bodies swaying as they walked. The weight distribution was all wrong. They were carrying the boulders on their backs, but their center of gravity kept shifting. Hey, Pyrith, Katie called to the small dragon she'd noticed the night before. Hold on a second before you start. Pyrith paused, surprised anyone was talking to him. The other dragons usually ignored him. Katie climbed up his side, he was too startled to object, and examined how the boulder sat on his back. Okay, see how it's rolling toward your left side? That's making you work 3 times harder than you need to. If you shift it forward about 6 inches and angle it like this. She helped him adjust the position. There. Now your spine is doing the work, not your muscles. Pyrith took a tentative step. Then another. His eyes widened. It's lighter. Not lighter. Just balanced. Katie hopped down. Physics doesn't care if you're a dragon or a human. Weight is weight. Within minutes, other dragons were asking for help. Katie went from dragon to dragon, adjusting boulder placement, explaining leverage points, showing them how small changes in position made massive differences in effort. By the end of the exercise, Talon Wing completed the course faster than any other wing that morning. Instructor Kravik said nothing, but Katie caught him watching her with a different expression. Not quite respect. But maybe not complete contempt anymore. The pattern repeated itself over the following days. During flight combat simulations, Katie couldn't participate, humans lacked wings, obviously. But she could watch the training footage and analyze patterns. She noticed that dragons tended to rely on raw power and aggression, often telegraphing their moves. You're diving too early, she told a dragon named Thornak after he'd been defeated 3 times in a row. Your opponent sees you coming from a mile away. What if you fake the dive, let them commit to a defensive position, then attack from a different angle? Thornak tried it. He won his next match. During endurance trials in superheated chambers, where Katie absolutely could not participate because she'd literally cook, she studied the monitoring equipment and noticed that the dragons were breathing wrong. They were taking shallow breaths, which made them tire faster. Deep breaths, she explained to Pyrith during a break. Fill your entire lung capacity. Your body is working harder when you breathe shallow. It's like, imagine trying to fuel a fire with tiny puffs of air versus one big steady breath. Pyritha's endurance times improved by 20%. The turning point came 2 weeks into training. The gauntlet was the Academy's most feared exercise, an obstacle course filled with fire traps, simulated attacks, and psychological torture designed to break weak dragons. Each dragon ran it alone. It was sacred tradition. Individual strength. Individual glory. Individual failure. Pyrith had already failed twice. Dragons only got 3 attempts. After that, expulsion. Katie knew he was terrified. She'd seen him growing quieter each day, retreating into himself. The other dragons in Talon Wing had started treating him better since she'd arrived, but that almost made it worse. Now he had something to lose. The night before his final attempt, Katie found him in a storage alcove behind the barracks, trying to make himself invisible. His scales were dull with stress, and he flinched when she approached. "Go away," he muttered. "I don't need pity." "Good, because I'm not offering any." Katie sat down next to him, which was awkward since he was roughly the size of a small car. "I'm offering company. There's a difference." Pyrith said nothing. Katie pulled out her notebook, the one she'd been using to sketch the Academy. She flipped to a blank page. "Tell me about the gauntlet. Every detail." "Why? You can't run it for me." "No, but I can help you think about it differently." She started drawing as he talked, mapping out the course section by section. The fire walls. The moving platforms. The chamber of illusions at the end. "The thing is," Katie said, sketching, "you've been treating this like a test of strength. But look at it." She showed him her map. "It's a puzzle. Each section has a solution, and the solution isn't always hit it harder or fly faster." "The firewalls? You said they pulse in patterns. That means there's timing involved." "The platforms? They're testing balance and planning, not power." "And the illusion chamber?" "The illusion chamber shows your worst fears," Pyrith whispered. "It's designed to make you freeze." "Right. So the solution isn't to not be afraid. The solution is to understand that fear is just information. It tells you what matters to you." Katie looked at him directly. "What do you see in the chamber?" Pyrith hesitated. "I see myself. Alone. Failed. With everyone watching." "Okay. So your fear is letting people down and being isolated." Katie nodded. "Here's the thing, that fear is real. But it's already happened, hasn't it? You've already failed twice. Everyone already watched. You've already felt alone. And yet here you are. Still trying. That's not weakness, Pyrith. That's the strongest thing I've seen anyone do at this academy." They stayed up most of the night, talking through strategies. Not just for the gauntlet, but about fear and failure and what it meant to be strong. The next morning, Pyrith stood at the entrance to the gauntlet. Every dragon in Talon Wing had gathered to watch, not to mock, but to support. Katie had somehow made them care about each other. The exercise began. Pyrith moved through the course differently than before. He watched the fire pulses and timed his movements. He balanced carefully on the platforms instead of rushing. And when he entered the illusion chamber and saw his greatest fear materialize, he remembered what Katie said. The illusion showed him alone and failed. But Pyrith looked at it and thought, "I've survived this before. I can survive it again." He walked through the illusion. It shattered. He completed the gauntlet with seconds to spare. When Pyrith emerged, breathing hard but triumphant, Talon Wing erupted in roars of approval. He walked straight to Katie, who looked tiny and fragile surrounded by massive dragons. Pyrith lowered his head and gently touched his snout to her forehead, the sacred gesture of family recognition. The roaring stopped. Every dragon froze. Then, one by one, every member of Talon Wing approached Katie and performed the same gesture. Thornak. Then Scarix. Then all 30 dragons. In the observation tower, Commander Varketh watched in stunned silence. In 3,000 years of Academy history, nothing like this had ever happened. The human hadn't just survived. She changed everything. The morning after Pyrith's success, Katie walked into the dining hall and found her usual empty table occupied. All 30 members of Talon Wing had moved their meal stations to surround her spot. Thornak, the biggest dragon in their wing, had even saved her a seat, which was hilarious because dragon seats were basically stone pedestals designed for creatures 10 times her size. "We thought you might want company," Pyrith said, looking almost shy. Katie grinned. "You guys know I can't eat raw meat, right?" That's like, extremely not a human thing. We know, said a dragon named Kessa, her blue scales shimmering. Thornak raided the supply depot last night. Found these. She pushed forward a box of human rations, bland protein bars and freeze-dried meals, but edible. You stole food for me? Borrowed, Thornak corrected, looking pleased with himself. Very different. Word spread through the academy like wildfire. The human had formed a pact bond with Talon Wing. Instructors didn't know what to make of it. Some were fascinated, watching how Talon Wing's training scores had skyrocketed. Others were disgusted, muttering about contamination and weakness. Commander Varketh called Katie to his office 3 days later. The room was sweltering, apparently dragons liked their offices the temperature of a sauna. He studied her for a long moment, his golden eyes unreadable. What have you done to them? He asked finally. Taught them to work together? Dragons do not work together. We are warriors. Individual strength is our foundation. Katie wiped sweat from her forehead. With respect, Commander, that's not entirely true. I've been reading your history. Ancient dragon clans fought as units. The solo warrior thing only became dominant about 1,000 years ago. You guys used to understand teamwork. Varketha's eyes narrowed dangerously. You presume to lecture me on dragon history? No, sir. I'm just saying, maybe we're not inventing something new. Maybe we're remembering something old. Katie met his gaze despite her hammering heart. And it's working. Talon Wing's scores prove it. Varketh dismissed her without another word, but Katie caught something in his expression. Not anger. Curiosity. The bond deepened over the following weeks. Katie became Talon Wing's unofficial den mother, a role that didn't exist in dragon military structure but emerged naturally. When two dragons got into a territorial dispute over sleeping alcoves, Katie mediated. When Kessa struggled with advanced flight mathematics, Katie organized a study group. When young Fyrex got sick from eating contaminated meat, Katie sat with him through the night, keeping cold compresses on his head and telling him stories until the fever broke. The dragons, in turn, became fiercely protective. When a senior cadet named Vorgath made a crude comment about human fragility in the training yard, 3 Talon Wing members cornered him later. No violence occurred, dragons had strict rules about that, but Vorgath walked away looking significantly less confident. The message was clear: disrespect Katie, and you disrespected all of them. Katie also began understanding dragon culture on a deeper level. She learned that their obsession with fire wasn't about destruction, it was about transformation and renewal. She discovered that their harsh training wasn't cruelty but a form of respect, pushing each other to become stronger. She even started sleeping closer to the heat vents, her body slowly adapting to the warmth. But the real test came when the Commandant announced the Crucible, a month-long field exercise on one of the harshest planets in the sector. Wings would be dropped into hostile territory with objectives to complete and limited supplies. It was the defining trial of every dragon's training. Half of all wings failed. Some cadets didn't come back alive. Katie can't possibly participate, Instructor Kravik said during the briefing. She lacks the physical capabilities. Katie felt 30 pairs of eyes turn toward her, defensive and protective. We'll find a way, Pyrath said quietly. She's Talon Wing. She goes. That night, Talon Wing held an emergency meeting in the barracks. Katie sat cross-legged on Thornak's alcove while the dragons gathered around. The Crucible environment is frozen tundra, Kessa explained, pulling up data on her tablet. Temperatures below -40. Magnetic storms that ground equipment. Predators that hunt in packs. I won't survive an hour in those conditions, Katie admitted. Even with cold weather gear, humans aren't built for that. Then we adapt, Pyrath said firmly. We've been training the dragon way. Now we train Katie's way, as a team. They spent 3 weeks preparing in secret. Thornak and 2 others worked with the Academy's engineer to design a harness system that would let them carry Katie during flight without restricting their combat ability. Kessa studied human thermal requirements and calculated exactly how much heat Katie would need to survive. Fyrex, who was brilliant with tactics, began developing entirely new wing formations that accounted for a ground-based member. Katie contributed her own skills. She trained the dragons in concepts foreign to their culture: endurance pacing, resource conservation, and group decision-making. She taught them hand signals for silent communication and showed them how to navigate using stars instead of instruments. Why stars? Thornak asked, confused. We have nav systems. Because magnetic storms kill nav systems. Stars don't stop working. Katie smiled. Humans had to learn this stuff back when we were still stuck on one planet. The most surprising development came from Katie's limitations becoming tactical advantages. She couldn't fly, but she could move through terrain that would crack under dragon weight. She couldn't breathe fire, but she could operate in cold environments where even dragons struggled. She couldn't fight with claws and teeth, but she could plan and strategize while dragons focused on execution. We're not accommodating weakness, Phyrex realized one evening. We're incorporating different strengths. 2 days before the Crucible deployment, Pyrith approached Katie privately. There's something we want to do. A ceremony. But only if you're comfortable with it. That evening, Talonwing led Katie to a private chamber deep in the academy, a sacred space she'd never seen before. The walls were carved with ancient dragon symbols, and in the center stood a basin of polished stone. This is the gathering of flames, Pyrith explained. When dragons complete their training, they share fire breath in a ceremonial circle. It marks them as clutchmates. Family forever. Katie looked at the 30 dragons surrounding her. But I can't breathe fire. We know, Kessa said softly. That's why we adapted it. Like everything else. One by one, each dragon approached the stone basin and breathed a small, controlled flame into it. The fire grew, fed by 30 different sources, until it blazed with combined heat and light. The flames danced with different colors, reds and oranges and even hints of blue and green. Pyrith gestured to Katie. You carried a different kind of flame to us. The fire of connection. Of caring when you had no reason to. Of seeing strength in collaboration instead of dominance. We wouldn't be who we are without it. Katie felt tears burning in her eyes. She approached the basin, feeling the heat radiating from the combined flames of her family. Slowly, she placed both hands into the warm light above the fire, not burning, just warm and alive. The dragons began to hum, a deep resonant sound that vibrated through Katie's chest. It was their way of singing, she realized. This was their version of the lullabies she'd played on her harmonica that first night. Thornax spoke the ceremonial words. By fire and will, by strength and heart, we claim you as ours. You are Talonwing's heartkeeper. No dragon has ever held this position. But no dragon ever needed to. You brought us something we'd lost. When the ceremony ended, Katie stumbled outside into the cool night air, emotionally overwhelmed. She sat on a stone wall overlooking the lava flows, trying to process what had just happened. Commander Varketh found her there. Heartkeeper, he said, sitting beside her, carefully, because the wall wasn't really designed for dragon weight. Do you understand what they've given you? A panic attack. Katie tried to joke, but her voice shook. Responsibility. Varketh stared at the glowing lava. They will die for you now. Not because they are ordered to, but because you've become part of them. That is not a small thing. Katie nodded slowly. I'll die for them too, if it comes to that. I know. Varketh stood. That's what worries me. The Crucible is more dangerous than they've told you. Many don't return. And now 30 of my best cadets will risk everything to protect one human. Then I'll make sure they don't have to, Katie said quietly. We'll protect each other. That's what family does. Varketh looked at her for a long moment, then did something Katie had never seen. He performed the forehead touch gesture himself. Brief and formal, but unmistakable. Make them better, he said. Not softer. Better. As he walked away, Katie realized the Crucible wasn't just a test for Talonwing. It was a test for everything she believed about humans and dragons learning from each other. 3 days later, they boarded the transport. 30 dragons and 1 human. A family heading into hell together. The dropship shuddered as it penetrated Carrick's Prime's atmosphere. Katie pressed her face to the viewport and immediately regretted it. Below stretched an endless expanse of ice and howling white storms. This wasn't snow like back home, this was a frozen wasteland that looked actively hostile to life. Temperature reading -62 degrees, the pilot announced. Magnetic interference at 70%. Your nav systems will be unreliable at best. Beside Katie, Pyrith shifted nervously. We've trained for this. Yeah, we have. Katie adjusted the thermal suit that made her look like a marshmallow. The harness rig sat ready nearby, an engineering marvel that would let 2 dragons carry her during flight without throwing off their balance. Just stick to the plan. Their mission was straightforward on paper: retrieve an encrypted data core from an abandoned research station 200 miles north, then reach the extraction point 300 miles south. 7 days to complete it. 12 dragon wings were being deployed across different sectors, all with different objectives. This wasn't just training, it was a competition. The dropship landed with a violent thud. The rear hatch opened, and Arctic wind screamed into the hold. Katie's exposed face felt like it was being stabbed with frozen needles. "Move out!" Thornak roared over the wind. Talon wing deployed in the practice formation they drilled. Katie clipped into the harness between Kessa and Fyrex, and they lifted off immediately, staying low to avoid the worst of the wind. The landscape below was a nightmare of ice crevasses and jagged ridges. The first day was brutal but manageable. They navigated using Katie's star charts when the magnetic storm scrambled their instruments. When they needed to cross a frozen canyon, Katie scouted the ice bridges first. Her lighter weight meant she could test them without risking a collapse that would doom a dragon. Night fell fast and hard. The temperature dropped to -80. Even dragons, who loved heat, were suffering. They huddled together in a cave formation, sharing body warmth. Katie stayed in the center, surrounded by living furnaces, but still shivered violently. "Your lips are blue," Pyrath said, concerned. "Yeah, well, your scales are frosting over, so we're even." Katie's teeth chattered. "We need to keep moving at first light. Staying still too long out here is death." Day 2 brought their first real crisis. A massive ice shelf collapsed as they flew over it, sending half the wing tumbling into a deep crevasse. Katie watched in horror as Thornak, Kessa, and 2 others disappeared into the white abyss. "Go!" Katie shouted at Pyrath. "Get me down there." The rescue took 3 hours. The fallen dragons were trapped under ice chunks weighing tons. Katie couldn't lift anything, but she could squeeze into spaces dragons couldn't reach. She crawled through the narrow gaps, setting anchor points for cables, coordinating the extraction like a construction foreman. "Pull on 3. 1, 2, 3. Her voice echoed through the ice. Slowly, painfully, they extracted everyone. Thornak had a cracked rib. Kessa's wing was badly bruised. But they were alive. They lost half a day to the rescue. Now they were behind schedule. Day 3 brought predators. Frost WYRMS, creatures even larger than dragons, perfectly adapted to the ice. 6 of them, drawn by the smell of Thornak's blood. They circled Talon wing like sharks. "We can fight them," Fyrex growled, flames gathering in his throat. "No." Katie studied the creatures through her binoculars. "Look at their behavior. They're not hunting. They're displaying. It's mating season. How does that help us?" Katie grabbed the emergency flare kit. "We redirect them. Frost WYRMS are attracted to heat signatures that match their courtship displays. If we set off thermal flares in that valley to the east, they'll go investigate instead of staying here." It worked. The WYRMS lumbered toward the false signals, leaving Talon Wing's path clear. They'd avoided combat entirely through observation and strategy, very UN Dragon-like, but effective. By day 5, they reached the research station. It was a frozen tomb of metal and ice, half buried in a glacier. The data core was deep inside, in a chamber that had lost power decades ago. The problem? The doorway was dragon-sized, but the internal corridors had collapsed to spaces barely 3 feet wide. "I'll go," Katie said immediately. "Absolutely not," Thornak countered. "It's unstable. The entire structure could collapse. Which is exactly why it has to be me. I can fit. You can't." Katie was already checking her gear. "Besides, you need someone who can work in extreme cold. My body temperature is lower than yours, I have a better chance in there." They argued for 20 minutes before Pyrath finally agreed. "But you wear a locator beacon, and if anything shifts, you get out immediately." The interior of the research station was like crawling through a frozen nightmare. Katie squeezed through gaps between collapsed walls, climbed over frozen equipment, and navigated by headlamp through pitch-black corridors. Ice had formed in bizarre crystalline structures, making everything look alien. She found the data core in a sealed vault, exactly where the mission brief said it would be. Getting it out took another hour of careful work. By the time Katie emerged, her hands were so cold she couldn't feel them. Kessa immediately wrapped her wings around Katie, sharing warmth. "Never do that again." "No promises." They started the return journey to the extraction point, but they were now a full day behind schedule. To make it in time, they'd have to take a direct route through the most dangerous terrain, a mountain range called the Serpent's Spine. That's where they ran into Vorgatha's wing. Vorgath, the same arrogant dragon who'd mocked Katie weeks ago, stood blocking their path with his entire wing. 15 dragons, all bigger and more aggressive than Talon Wing's members. Well, Vorgath sneered. The pet human and her collection of weaklings. I heard you were behind schedule. We completed our objective, Pyroth said carefully. We're heading to extraction. So are we. But here's the thing, the Crucible allows tactical interference between wings. We can challenge you for your data core. Winner takes both objectives and gets double points. Loser, well, loser probably doesn't graduate. Katie's heart sank. This was legal. Brutal, but legal. Dragon culture encouraged this kind of competition. We accept your challenge, Katie said, stepping forward before anyone could stop her. Vorgath laughed. You? The human accepts? This is rich. I accept on behalf of Talon Wing. But I invoke the trial of value, an ancient challenge right. Instead of ritual combat, we demonstrate worth through a task of skill and strategy. Vorgatha's laughter died. The trial of value was old lore, rarely used, but unbreakable. What task? Katie pointed to the highest peak of the serpent's spine. Both wings raced to the summit. First team to retrieve their banner planted at the top and return here wins everything. The wind speeds up their make flight impossible, you have to climb. The instructors observing via satellite confirmed the challenge was legal. Both wings had 2 hours to prepare. Why did you do that? Phyrex hissed. We're injured and exhausted. They're fresh. Because Vorgath would have destroyed us in combat. This way, we have a chance. Katie pulled out her notebook, sketching the mountain. They're stronger, but we're smarter. And we work as a team. They don't. The climb began at dawn. Vorgatha's wing attacked the mountain with typical dragon aggression, powering through, each member trying to prove individual strength. Within an hour, they were spread out across the slope, competing with each other as much as with Talon Wing. Talon Wing climbed differently. They moved as a unit. Katie coordinated from the middle of the formation, calling out the safest routes, identifying weak ice, directing their strongest climbers to set anchor points for the others. When one dragon tired, 2 others supported them. They rotated positions constantly, no one pushing beyond their limits. Thornak, despite his cracked rib, took point because his size could break through ice barriers. Kessa used her superior balance for the technical sections. Pyroth, smallest but most agile, scouted ahead. They reached the summit first, grabbed their banner, and started down. That's when they heard the crack. Below them, 3 members of Vorgatha's wing had fallen into a crevasse, a deep one, and the ice was still fracturing around them. The rest of Vorgatha's wing was panicking, pulling randomly, making it worse. Katie could see the extraction point in the distance. They could reach it first, secure their victory, and leave Vorgatha's wing to their failure. Every dragon in Talon Wing was thinking the same thing. By dragon tradition, by warrior code, they should keep moving. Competition was sacred. Weakness earned no mercy. Katie made the decision in 3 seconds. We helped them. Katie, Pyroth started. We helped them, she repeated firmly. Because that's who we are. That's what you taught me about real dragon strength. It's not about dominating others. It's about being strong enough to help when it matters. Talon Wing descended to the crevasse. They organized the rescue with practiced efficiency, the same techniques they'd used on day 2. Katie directed the operation while Thornak and the others did the heavy lifting. They pulled all 3 dragons to safety. The rescue cost them 40 minutes. Vorgatha's wing reached the extraction point first by a narrow margin. Katie felt the weight of failure settling on Talon Wing's shoulders. They'd lost. After everything, they'd lost. Then Commander Varketha's voice crackled over the comm system, broadcast to all wings on the planet. Attention all cadets. Talon Wing is awarded the Crucible victory. Stunned silence. Victory is not determined by who crosses a finish line first, Varketh continued. It is determined by who embodies the true spirit of dragon warriorhood. Talon Wing demonstrated that today. They showed that real strength means having the power to destroy your enemy and choosing instead to save them. That is the warrior's path we have forgotten. That is the path this human has helped us remember. Vorgath approached Katie slowly. For a moment, she thought he might attack. Instead, he lowered his massive head and performed the forehead touch, the gesture of respect and family. You could have left us, he said quietly. Thank you for not being as ruthless as we would have been. One by one, every member of Vorgatha's wing performed the gesture. 30 dragons became 4 to 5. Katie looked at Talon Wing, her family, and saw pride in their eyes. Not because they'd won. Because they'd chosen right. 3 weeks after returning from the Crucible, Katie stood in her barracks packing the same worn backpack she'd arrived with. Graduation was in 2 days, and the entire academy was buzzing with an energy she'd never felt before. But underneath the excitement, Katie felt a knot of anxiety growing in her stomach. The problem started during a routine meeting with the instructors. Katie had assumed her graduation was a formality. Talon Wing had won the Crucible, their scores were the highest in academy history, and even Commander Varketh had publicly praised their performance. She was wrong. The Draconic High Council has concerns, Instructor Kravik explained, looking uncomfortable. You have not completed the physical requirements. You cannot breathe fire. You cannot fly. By traditional standards, you have not earned the right to graduate as a dragon warrior. Katie felt like she'd been punched. But I completed every mission. I helped Talon Wing become the best. We know. And many of us support you. Kravik's expression softened. But dragon tradition goes back thousands of years. The council fears that graduating you diminishes the honor of every warrior who came before. They're meeting now to decide your fate. That night, Katie couldn't sleep. She walked through the empty training grounds, trying to process everything. After all they'd been through, after changing an entire culture's approach to teamwork, it might mean nothing because she couldn't breathe fire. She found Pyroth on the observation deck, staring at the stars. Can't sleep either? Katie asked, sitting beside him. If they don't let you graduate, I'm not accepting my rank, Pyroth said firmly. None of us are. Don't be stupid. You earned this. So did you. Pyroth turned to look at her. Katie, before you arrived, I was going to quit. I'd failed the gauntlet twice, everyone treated me like I was worthless, and I believed them. You saved me. You saved all of us. If the council can't see that, then their standards are wrong. The next morning, Katie was summoned to the Grand Chamber, a massive hall where the High Council made important decisions. 13 ancient dragons sat in elevated positions, their scales showing centuries of age. Commander Varketh stood to the side, his expression unreadable. The head counselor, a silver dragon named Ancestral Throck, spoke first. Human Katie Brooks. Your presence at this academy has been controversial. We have reviewed your performance. We have heard testimony from instructors and cadets. And we must now decide whether you have earned the right to graduate as a warrior of the Draconic Empire. Katie's mouth was dry. May I speak? You may. I know I can't do what dragons do. I can't fly or breathe fire or carry tons of weight. And honestly, when I first arrived, I thought that would make me useless here. Katie's voice grew stronger. But I learned something important. Strength isn't just about what you can do alone. It's about what you help others become. Talon Wing didn't get stronger because I could compete with them physically. They got stronger because I showed them that working together wasn't weakness, it was a different kind of strength. Dragon culture values individual prowess, Ancestral Throck countered. What you describe sounds like dependency. With respect, sir, that's not what dragon culture used to value. Katie pulled out her notebook, the one filled with sketches and notes from months of research. I've studied your history. Ancient dragon clans fought as units. They protected each other. They combined their strengths. The emphasis on solo warriors only emerged about 1,000 years ago, and your military records show that's when your casualty rates increased by 40%. Murmurs rippled through the council. You're suggesting our traditions are flawed, another counselor asked, offended. I'm suggesting that maybe you forgot part of what made you great. And maybe that's okay. Cultures evolve. They're supposed to. Katie met their eyes. I'm not asking you to lower your standards. I'm asking you to expand them. Because the galaxy needs warriors who can fight, yes, but it also needs warriors who can build bridges between species. Who can see strength in diversity. Who can make everyone around them better. The council deliberated for 3 hours. Katie waited outside with Talon Wing, who had refused to leave her side. Other wings gathered too, word had spread. Vorgatha's wing showed up. Then others. Soon, nearly 200 dragon cadets filled the hallway in silent support. Finally, the doors opened. Ancestral Throck emerged. The council has made its decision. However, we require one final demonstration. You must face the Judgment Flame. Katie's blood ran cold. She'd heard about the Judgment Flame, a ceremonial corridor filled with dragon fire that graduates walked through. Dragons were naturally resistant to their own fire, so it was more symbolic than dangerous. For them. For a human, it was a death sentence. That's murder, Pyroth said flatly. She'll burn alive. Then perhaps she should decline and accept an honorary certificate instead, Ancestral Throck replied. The choice is hers. Every dragon in the hallway was staring at Katie. She could walk away right now. Get a piece of paper that said she participated. Go home alive. But that wasn't why she'd come here. I'll walk the judgment flame, Katie said. But I want to add one condition, under the trial of value provision. I request that Talon Wing walks with me. The council members looked shocked. The judgment flame is an individual trial. It tests personal worthiness. And I'm arguing that human worthiness is different from dragon worthiness. Our strength is in connection. In making those around us stronger. My trial should reflect that. Katie stood straighter. If you're testing whether I embody warrior values, then test the truth of what I represent, that we're stronger together. The council couldn't refuse without contradicting their own ancient laws. After heated debate, they agreed. Graduation day arrived. The entire academy assembled in the ceremony hall. The judgment flame corridor was lit, a 100-foot pathway of dragon fire so intense the air shimmered with heat. Katie stood at the entrance in ceremonial robes, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Talon Wing assembled around her in a formation they'd practiced in secret. They interlocked their wings, creating a living shield with Katie protected in the center. The heat would still be intense, possibly fatal, but this was their only chance. Ready? Pyrath asked quietly. Katie nodded, not trusting her voice. They stepped into the flames together. The heat was immediate and overwhelming. Katie's eyes streamed with tears. Her skin felt like it was blistering even through the dragon's protection. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, trusting that her family wouldn't let her fall. The dragons around her grunted with effort, absorbing temperatures that even they found punishing. Thornak's scales were glowing. Kessa's breath came in labored gasps. But none of them faltered. 50 feet. 75 feet. Almost there. Katie's legs were shaking. The heat was getting inside her lungs. Just a few more steps. They emerged from the far end of the corridor together. Katie collapsed immediately, gasping for air. Pyrath and Kessa caught her before she hit the ground. Medical staff rushed forward, but Katie waved them off. I'm okay, she managed. We're okay. The ceremony hall was completely silent. Then, slowly, one dragon began to roar, not in challenge, but in celebration. Then another. Then 100. Then all of them. The sound was deafening and beautiful. Ancestral Thruk approached, and for the first time, Katie saw something like respect in his ancient eyes. You have demonstrated that warrior strength takes many forms. Some wield fire and claw. Others wield something more powerful, the ability to transform those around them. He placed the graduation insignia around Katie's neck. Welcome, warrior Katie Brooks, to the ranks of the Draconic Empire. But the ceremony wasn't finished. Ancestral Thruk raised his voice. Furthermore, the High Council creates a new position at this academy, Cross-Species Integration Specialist. We offer this role to Katie Brooks, should she choose to stay. Katie looked at Talon Wing. At Pyrath, who'd become like a little brother. At Thornak, Kessa, Phyrex, and all the others who'd become her family. She thought about going home to Earth, back to teaching second graders. Both choices had value. But only one felt right. I accept, Katie said. On one condition, humanity sends more people like me. Teachers, bridge builders, people who understand that strength comes in different forms. Agreed. 6 months later, Katie stood in the same landing area where she'd first arrived, watching a new transport shuttle touch down. The doors opened, and 5 humans stepped out, teachers, counselors, scientists. They looked terrified and excited in equal measure. Behind Katie, 30 dragons waited. But not just Talon Wing anymore. Dozens of wings had requested the new integrated training program. Dragon culture was evolving, slowly but genuinely. A young dragon cadet named Riska, barely 6 months into training, approached nervously. Will the new humans be like you? Katie smiled. They'll be different. Each human is unique, just like each dragon. But they'll care. They'll try. And they'll help you become the best version of yourselves. Riska performed the forehead touch gesture, the one that had been reserved for family but was now spreading throughout the academy as a sign of respect and connection. In the observation tower, Commander Varketh watched the scene with Ancestral Thruk beside him. Do you think this will last? Thruk asked. Or will dragon culture eventually reject this change? I think, Varketh said slowly, that human named Katie Brooks reminded us of something we'd forgotten, that our ancestors conquered the stars not because they were the strongest individually, but because they understood that true power comes from lifting others up. She didn't weaken us. She made us remember what strength really means. Far below, Katie was introducing the new humans to their dragon partners, already mediating the first nervous interactions, already building bridges. Above them, carved into the stone of the Academy's entrance, a new inscription had been added to the ancient words of Dragon Valor. Strength is fire. Strength is claw. But the greatest strength is the heart that helps others rise. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Draconic Imperial War Academy understood that warrior didn't mean alone. It meant family.